At my son's high school graduation party, my teenage daughter looked at me across the yard in front of everyone and said, "Why are you even here pretending to be a good mom? Aunt Renata told us the truth about you years ago." The guests went quiet. My heart stopped, and then I heard the specific thing my daughter said next, a detail, a private, false thing, and I realized I finally knew exactly how to prove what my sister-in-law had been doing to my children for 6 years. Let me back up. My name is Sylvie Adderman. I'm 44 years old, and for 6 years my sister-in-law conducted a patient campaign to turn my two children against me, feeding them lies, positioning herself as the aunt who really understood them, and slowly replacing me in my own children's hearts with a version of me she'd invented. She nearly succeeded. This is the story of the day her own strategy finally handed me the proof to undo it. Let me tell you about Renata. Renata is my husband's sister. And from the beginning of my marriage, she was the kind of person who needed to be central, charming, magnetic, and quietly unable to bear anyone else being loved more than she was. Renata never had children of her own, a fact that carried a grief I once had sympathy for before I understood what she'd decided to do about it. Renata didn't want children. Renata wanted mine, not to kidnap them, nothing so crude. What Renata wanted was to be the most important woman in my children's lives, more important than their mother, and she pursued that goal with a patience and a cruelty I didn't recognize until it was nearly too late. My kids are Theo and Mara. When this began, they were young, Theo around 10, Mara around 8, and Renata was the fun aunt, the cool aunt, the one with no kids of her own who had endless time and money for hers. She lavished them with attention, gifts, trips, a sympathetic ear. And I, a busy working mother in the ordinary trenches of parenting, the one who enforced bedtimes and homework and consequences, welcomed it. What mother doesn't want a loving aunt in her children's lives? I was grateful. I was, it turns out, being set up. Because Renata was doing something underneath the generosity. She was, slowly and skillfully, positioning herself as the good mother and me as the bad one. And she was doing it in the place I couldn't see, in private conversations with my own children over years. Here is how it works, and it's insidious precisely because each piece is invisible and deniable. Renata would take the kids for a weekend, and she'd be all indulgence, no rules, no bedtimes, pure fun. And she'd say things, gentle things. "Your mom's so strict, isn't she?" "I'd never make you do that. Your mom seems so stressed all the time. It must be hard for you. You can always talk to me about anything. I'm not like your mom, I actually listen." She was building a contrast, patiently, meal by meal, weekend by weekend. Aunt Renata is warmth and freedom and understanding. Mom is rules and stress and distance. And then it escalated, from contrast to outright lies. As the kids got older, Renata began telling them things, that I'd said things about them I never said, that I'd considered leaving the family, that I resented being a mother, that I'd wanted to send them away. She positioned herself as the keeper of hard truths about their mother, the brave aunt willing to tell them what everyone else hid. And children, especially teenagers, are vulnerable to exactly this, the adult who flatters them by treating them as mature enough for the truth, who bonds with them against a parent, who makes them feel specially chosen. I watched my children change toward me over those years, and I could not understand why. Theo grew distant, then cold. Mara, my sweet Mara, became hostile, rolling her eyes, treating me with a contempt that seemed to come from nowhere. I blamed adolescence. I blamed myself. Maybe I was too strict, too stressed, too distant, all the things I'd later learn Renata had been whispering. I went to a parenting counselor. I tried harder. I softened rules. I made more time. I did everything, and nothing worked, because I was fighting a war I didn't know existed against an enemy I thought was an ally. And Renata was always there, in the middle of it, playing both sides with genius. To me, she was sympathetic. "Teenagers are so hard, Sylvie, don't blame yourself. I'll talk to them for you." To the kids, she was their confidant against me. She'd offer to mediate, which meant more private time to pour in more poison. She was the arsonist who kept showing up to help fight the fire. The cruelest part is what it did to my sense of myself as a mother. I began to believe I was failing at the most important thing in my life. My children seemed to despise me, and I couldn't understand why, and the not understanding was its own torture. I'd lie awake asking what I'd done wrong. The answer was nothing. But Renata had built a world in which my children believed I'd done everything wrong, and I was living in that world without a map. Here's how it broke open. My son Theo's high school graduation, a party in our backyard, extended family, friends. My daughter Mara, 16 now and fully immersed in Renata's version of me, was in a mood all day, radiating the contempt that had become normal. And at some point, in front of a yard full of guests, something set her off, and she turned to me and said, loud and cutting, "Why are you even here pretending to be a good mom? Aunt Renata told us the truth about you years ago." The guests went quiet. My face burned, and I was about to dissolve, and then Mara kept going, and she said the specific thing that changed everything. "She told us how you tried to give us up. You told Dad you never wanted kids, and you tried to leave us at Grandma's for good when we were little. Renata was the one who stopped you. She's the reason we're even still a family." I want to explain why that specific lie was the key that unlocked the whole thing. Because it was so specific, and so false, and it referenced a particular claim, that Renata had stopped me from abandoning them at my mother's house at a particular time. And it was Chebel. It was a factual claim about a specific event that had never happened, attributed to a specific person at a specific time. It wasn't vague poison anymore. It was a concrete, false, sourced accusation, and a concrete false accusation can be disproven. More than that, it told me, finally and with total clarity, what had been happening for 6 years. My daughter had just told me, in front of everyone, that Renata had been feeding my children detailed, invented stories in which I was a mother who tried to abandon them, and Renata was their savior. The vague hostility of years suddenly had a name and a source, spoken aloud by my own child. I did not scream. I did not defend myself in that moment, because I understood, with the cold clarity these moments bring, that defending myself with words against 6 years of Renata's words would just look like a guilty mother's denial. I needed proof, and I finally knew where to find it. Here is what I did. First, I stayed calm at the party, absorbed the humiliation, and said only gently to Mara, "That never happened, sweetheart, and I think it's time we figured out together where these stories are coming from." Planting a seed. Not attacking Renata, that would have made the kids defend her, but expressing calm, wounded confusion, which is much harder for a teenager to dismiss than anger. Second, I went looking for evidence, and I found it in the place Renata had gotten careless, her communications with my children. Because Renata's whole method required ongoing private contact with Theo and Mara, and that contact, in the modern world, left a trail. My children were minors, and I was their mother, and I had every right, I checked with a lawyer to be sure, to review the devices and accounts I paid for and administered. And in Mara's messages, I found years of Renata's campaign in writing. Renata telling my daughter that I never wanted her. Renata coaching Mara on how to stand up to me. Renata explicitly, in text, telling my children not to tell me about their conversations. "This stays between us. Your mom wouldn't understand." The isolation clause, in writing, the same "please don't tell" that runs through every campaign like this. It was all there. 6 years of a woman systematically poisoning children against their mother, documented in her own words, because she'd been so certain the kids would never show me and I'd never look. Third, I did the hardest and most important thing. I didn't just confront Renata. I focused on my children. Because the goal was never revenge on Renata, the goal was getting my kids back. And that required them to see the truth themselves, not just be told it. I gathered the proof carefully, and I brought in a family therapist who specialized in exactly this, parental alienation, which is what this is called, and which is a recognized and serious form of emotional abuse. And with the therapist's guidance, I prepared to show my children, gently and at their own pace, the reality of what had been done to them. And then I addressed Renata. I invited her over alone, and I told her I knew. I laid out her own messages. And Renata did what people like her do. She went from denial to justification to fury. She said the children deserved to know the truth, her truth, that I was a cold mother, and she'd only been there for them the way I wasn't. Even cornered, she believed her own story. She could not distinguish between loving my children and stealing them. And I said, "Renata, you're done. You will have no more private contact with my children. I have your messages. I have a therapist involved." And what you've done has a name: parental alienation, emotional abuse. And if you ever try to contact them behind my back again, the next people who read these messages will be a judge and possibly the police. You wanted to be the most important woman in my children's lives. You're about to be a stranger to them. That's what you chose. Here's how it ended, and it ended in reconciliation, which was the only ending I ever actually wanted. The proof, shown to my children carefully and with a therapist's help, did its slow work. It's a strange grief for a teenager to discover that the aunt who understood them was manipulating them, and that the mother they'd been taught to resent had been telling the truth all along. It didn't happen overnight. Theo came around first. He was older, and part of him had already sensed something off about Renata's intensity. Mara took longer. She'd been in deepest, and untangling her required patience and love and the therapist's steady hand, and above all, my refusal to make her feel stupid for having believed. I never said, "I told you so." I only said over and over, "It's not your fault." She's an adult who lied to children. You did nothing wrong. And slowly, my children came back to me. Reading Renata's own messages was the turning point for Mara. Seeing, in the aunt's own words, the "don't tell your mom," and the coaching and the invented stories was undeniable in a way my defense never could have been. My daughter cried in my arms for the first time in years and said, "She told me you didn't love me." And I said, "I have loved you every single day of your entire life, and I never stopped. Not even when you looked at me like I was your enemy. I was just waiting for you to come home." And she did. Renata is gone from our lives. The family, once they understood, and her own messages made it undeniable, turned from her completely. There's little a family finds less forgivable than an adult who abuses its children, and turning kids against their own mother is exactly that. She lost the whole family she'd tried to manipulate, which is the poetic justice of it. She wanted to be central, and she made herself exiled. Our relationship with my kids is not just repaired. In some ways, it's deeper than before, because we survived something together and came out the other side with our eyes open. Theo is grown now, and close to me. Mara and I have a bond forged in the specific closeness of having been torn apart, and having fought our way back. She's told me she wants to be the kind of mother I turned out to be, once she could actually see me, which undid me completely, in the best way. For 6 years, my sister-in-law told my children a story in which I was the mother who didn't want them, and she was their savior. She made one mistake. She told the story so specifically, and wrote so much of it down, that when my daughter finally repeated it out loud, it stopped being a feeling I couldn't fight and became a lie I could prove. Renata spent 6 years teaching my children that their mother didn't love them. She never understood that a mother who's being erased doesn't stop loving her children. She just waits, patiently, through all the contempt and all the cold years, for the day she can finally show them the truth and welcome them home. I waited, and they came home.